Get ready to think about energy, culture, conscious leadership, and so much more on this episode of The Perfect Route. Welcome to the show. I've got Marissa Levin here. Hello, Marissa.
Hello, it's so good to be here.
It's great to have you here too. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I am a 35-year entrepreneur. I've built 5 different companies, have had a variety of different types of exits, and I'm currently running 2 firms, Marissa International, which is my umbrella company for all of my coaching, culture consulting, speaking, things of that nature. And then I have I5 Conscious Leadership, which is a leadership development and training company. And we have 2 very robust curriculums for both emerging and advanced leaders on how to be a conscious leader in today's world.
Outstanding. Yeah. I've run into the term conscious leader a few times, but I've never been quite clear what that means.
So, to be a conscious leader, conscious really means to be awakened or aware. And leadership, as we know, is about influence. And so it really is how to be uh, an influential person in an organization from a place of heightened awareness and just being truly dialed in to what your organization needs and what your people need, and being that present with those that you are leading really in every moment. And this is just something, it's how I'm wired. It's how I've always kind of moved through life. And it is how I've always led my organizations from the moment I started my first company over 35 years ago.
And it's worked out for you very well. It
It
sounds
has.
like conscious is the opposite of disengaged or burnt out.
Yeah, being basically the opposite of unaware, right?
Mhm.
Being not dialed in, not connected, not dialed into the emotions of your employees, not dialed into the energy of your organization, just kind of uh, going through the motions from your own agenda, if you will, rather than really being focused on creating an extraordinary place and experience for your people.
It's interesting. You mentioned energy, and I wanted to ask you, how does that fit into your practice and what you work with your clients on?
Well, energy is everything. Energy is contagious. Energy has a ripple effect in ways that most people can't even, understand. We've all been around those people that when they walk into a room, you can actually feel the energy shift, whether in a positive way or a negative way. Um, and as leaders, we have this incredible opportunity to really be dialed into the energy that we are bringing into our organizations and also to our client organizations as well. And when we are really dialed into that energy, that is when we can really create some marked shifts.
I've known a few energy vampires, as I call them. They just seem to suck the life out of whatever room they come into.
Yeah, most definitely. In fact, part of our curriculum, we actually teach time management and energy management. And in the energy management module, we actually talk about the energy vampires and how people can recognize them, and then how they can mitigate the impact that that energy has on them so that it doesn't impact their productivity.
Fascinating.
Yeah,
It's sort of like having self defense for these energy sinks, as I sometimes call them.
most definitely.
How does this all factor into culture? I know that's a big interest for you.
Yeah, well, I mean, culture is everything. Culture, as we all know, eats strategy for breakfast. That's always such a popular saying. The culture is the container. The culture is the environment that all of your employees are going to live in all day, every day while they're working for you. And it is a culture that is grounded in trust, and grounded in empathy, and grounded in compassion and emotional awareness. then your employees are going to be able to feel seen. They're going to be able to feel heard and connected to something bigger than themselves. And this is not just woo woo. I mean, there is specific research that shows that when an organization has a strong culture, there is a direct impact on the top line and the bottom line because employees are more engaged. And when people are more engaged in the organization, there is a higher level of oxytocin that actually is produced in their bodies. And they know that when there is more oxytocin, that people feel emotionally connected to the organization and to the people that live there and work there. And so we know that from an employee engagement standpoint, it really is divided into two camps. It's about the environment and the work that they do. And what research has shown us is that people stay because of the environment rather than the work that they're actually doing. That's how important it is to create a culture where people feel safe and seen and heard and feel supported by their leadership.
And trust is such a fragile thing. And your comment about the environment really hits home for me. There have been some organizations where just walking in the front door was a soul sucking experience. Like, I'm here again. And there have been other environments where, I've almost run through the front door and said, yeah, let's go.
Yeah, most definitely. And the leaders, they don't really, so many leaders out there don't understand the impact of their energy, right? Or the impact of lack of integrity, right? So they say one thing to their employees, and then the way things are carried out is totally different. Or, a lot of the work that I do with organizations around their culture is the values, mission, and vision. And when there is lack of integrity around the core values, they say that they stand for one thing, but then the way that they actually live is different. That is going to immediately break the trust of an organization. And we all know that business moves at the speed of trust.
Ooh, I like that. I just did a couple of webinars about what I call misaligned leadership, but it's the same theme that you just described. If the core values, mission, and vision aren't in alignment with what leadership is actually saying and or doing, then bad things are going to happen.
Bad things are going to happen. Yeah, yeah. So really critical that if you're rolling these out, they're not just living what I like to say on posters and coasters, but that the behaviors in the organization are actually supporting the values. And Brene Brown just released some interesting data that showed that I think it was like less than 20% of organizations surveyed that have their core values out. Less than 20% of organizations actually embody their core behaviors with or their core values with specific behaviors. So there's lots of companies out there talking about core values, but the majority of companies do not embody the core values.
And that's just a shame. It's, I mean, it's hard work to embody the core values, but it's A, it's worthwhile, and B, it's absolutely necessary.
I think it can be hard, but I think where it gets hard is if there's a disconnect between the leader's personal core values and the organization's core values. And I can remember being interviewed about this over 30 years ago. I was asked the question about the alignment between the values of the leader and the values of the organization that they're building. And I shared back then, and I'll share it again, that those values have to be one and the same, right? So for my first company, which was an education training and human capital firm. We grew that to about 14 million. I had about 90 employees. That was my first business. And for me, I mean, this is going back. I started that business 35 years ago, right? So we're going back like when AOL was our internet provider. We're
Mhm.
going way back and long before the idea of work life balance and work life integration. And at the time, I knew that I was going to want to start a family.
Mhm.
And I knew that I wanted to be present for my kids. And my kids are now 25 and 28. And so when we built that business, I knew that a value of what we called responsible flexibility, which
Hmm.
was really about allowing our employees to have the flexibility to be present with their families. That was one of our core values. And the first value that I ever defined for my company was quality. It was quality of life inside the company, quality of life outside the company, and quality of our products and services. And my first hire, reflecting on that, was a director of quality control. That
Hmm.
was my very first full-time hire at that company. But I was so committed to making sure that I was going to be living a life of balance and integration and making sure that I could be present for my kids, which was my absolute top priority. But I also wanted to build this business. So when we built the company, I couldn't be hypocritical and say, okay, I'm going to leave at 4 o'clock because I need to go get home. I want to go pick up my kids from Taekwondo, but all of you need to work later, right?
Mhm.
Like there has to be alignment and congruence, how the leader actually lives their life and then how they show up in the company, and ensuring that they're not holding themselves to one standard and holding their employees to another. And that is what it is to be fully in integrity with your core values, right? And my core values in that company really came into play. It's very easy to uphold your core values when things are going well, you know, when people think that leadership is easy.
Mhm.
Uh, but it's in the times of difficulty when we're challenged, to really remember what our core values are and making the decision to stay aligned to our core values, if sometimes it even means that that might impact how we are financially. And I certainly faced some of those decisions when I was running my company.
And it's hard to put that misalignment on a dashboard. By the
Hmm.
time you see the financial results, it's almost too late.
Yeah. Yeah. And those financial results show up in turnover,
Hmm.
right? They show up in lack of engagement. They show up in how much time people are taking off because they're just disengaged and not connected, right? It it shows up in the quality of the products that you're producing or the quality of the services that you're providing. It shows up in a lot of different nuanced ways when people are not in alignment with the values.
Yeah, you know, it, for me, it's a case of people, doing following what leaders do and not exactly what they say
Hmm.
when we've got misalignment. And, if we have a better alignment with the core values, mission, vision, and the leadership actions, then good things will follow. I'm an eternal optimist. So I truly believe that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um, so what are some interventions that help it with, these kinds of toxic workplaces?
My experience as a chief culture officer in different size organizations, I go in and I'm either a full-time chief culture officer for a period of time or a fractional chief culture officer. Um, Really, it's about communication and education, right?
Hmm.
So, uh, I've gone into organizations where I've been called in because the environment is just so incredibly toxic, and we need to just get back to a baseline of neutrality. Not even optimism, but or healthy, but just to get back from that place from toxicity to neutrality. And I've gone into organizations where I literally am encountering employees that are like deers in headlights. There's so much trauma. And so the first thing that needs to be done when you are stabilizing a culture is to let people know that, uh, I know it's going to take time for me to gain your trust, but my whole intention in being here is to create a safe environment, right? And
Hmm.
to make sure that you have processes in place with strong two-way communication. The two-way communication is really key. Um, One of the best practices that I've brought into different organizations is something that I created when I was running my first company, and that had to do with town hall meetings. A lot of companies do all hands meetings where the CEO will get up there either on Zoom or in person, and they'll give a state of the union right? They'll give a state of the company and they'll go through, here's what our, revenues are, and here's how many people we've lost and how many people we've gained. And, they'll do like a very quantitative type of presentation, right? And then they'll say, does anyone have any questions? And 99% of the time, nobody says anything, right? So having a one-way dialogue is a quickest way to create disengagement. And so for me, when I work with organizations around culture, really the first thing that I do is I go in and we have to do a pulse check. We got to know a baseline, like what are we working with? So I am certified in the organizational culture inventory, the OCI tool, which is the world's most implemented and most credible tool to be able to evaluate corporate culture. And so for larger companies, I absolutely will use that. For smaller companies, I might do something a little bit more informal, but we need to understand what we're working with. And I will tell you that every time I've ever gone into an organization for any culture work, 100% of the time, there is a disconnect between what the leaders think the culture is and how it's functioning and what the employees are actually experiencing. And so we have to expose that, right? We have to expose that contradiction, that dichotomy, and then we know what we're working with. Because what we want to do is close that gap, right? We want employees to know that they're heard. We create the container and the conditions for them to really express. And then what we do is create environments and opportunities for people to bring their voices into the conversations. So rather than doing just the traditional all hands, what I had done in my first company and what I've brought into clients since then is what I call the town hall. And what we do is we send out an anonymous survey, a week or two before the town hall, and we ask them, what should we be talking about? Right? Like, what am I missing? And what are your questions? And there's like no topic is off limits at all. And you would be surprised at the level of granularity the employees will go to get more information and more data and more transparency, okay, from the leaders about what is happening in the company. And they can read right through it when you're giving them BS answers, okay?
Hmm.
So the creating that place so that employees can ask the questions and that then the meetings are structured around those questions, that is an impactful and an effective town hall, okay? It's not about the leaders at the 50,000-foot level thinking that they know what the employees want to hear. They're always wrong. So you have to create the environment to let the employees bring their voices into the conversations. And then you have to answer them transparently and truthfully. And that is what brings us from a negative or toxic or non trust oriented culture, at least to neutrality.
Hmm.
And then from neutrality, then you can move on to positivity. And that's where you're going to start seeing velocity in engagement and in the business really moving forward with momentum. So it's got to be very conscious, right? Leaders have to be very conscious about how they are creating the containers for people to be expressing. And there has to be a lot of communication in different formats and mediums.
Denial is certainly powerful. And uh, how often do leaders underestimate the level of toxicity in their organization and
All the time,
all the time?
all the time, all the time. I've never, ever seen any organization anywhere where the leaders have their finger on the pulse of what's happening inside, ever.
They don't even, it's not even that they don't have their finger on the pulse. It's like they're 10 feet away from the body.
It's just, yeah. In my last engagement, which was a $40 million organization in the higher ed space, I was very much the bridge as the chief human resources officer and the chief culture officer. I was the bridge between the senior leadership team and the employees, right?
Hmm.
So I was one of the employees because I was in there as a W-2, and I was on the senior leadership team, and I had inherited a team of 6 highly traumatized women in my HR team, and I felt the gravity of the toxicity. I mean, I could literally feel it as a weight, and when I got in there, it was so important to me to reestablish safety for these incredible contributors, and making sure that they were seen and making sure that their work was valued by the senior leadership team, because it was very clear to me that there was a complete disconnect between what the senior leadership team thought was going on in the organization and what was really going on. And I took that role as that bridge and that catalyst very seriously. And I'm about to go into another organization that is private equity owned, and the company is a merger of two different companies,
Mm.
professional services as well as technology, and we're bringing those cultures together. So right there, right, that's going to be a major cultural bridge that we're going to have to build. And the CEO is an exceptional woman. Their leadership team is strong. I'm coaching up the various leaders who are now going into a C-level role who have never been in a C-level role, right? And that is a whole different way of looking at an organization, from the perspective, from how you engage with peers, how you communicate with the board. Being at the C-level is a whole different animal. And so I do a lot of prep for executives that are coming up into that C-level. And so I'm working with them, and we're going to be doing the whole cultural diagnosis. And I'm grateful to be working with a company that really understands the link between culture and the top line and bottom line results, because it always impacts both the top line and the bottom line. It is the most important secret weapon for organizations that understand it.
And then secret weapon. I love the secret weapon analogy there. Um, I'm a strategy guy, and
Hmm.
I fully agree with you that about the relationship between strategy and culture.
Hmm.
Um, so it always strikes me that if an organization has poor strategy and it's poorly executed, there's virtually no chance of success. Um, but maybe we need a three-dimensional grid where we've got strategy, and culture, and the success of an implementation, and culture can really knock out you know the certainly a good implementation and a good strategy. Um, in fact, it almost drags it down into that lower quadrant where nobody wants to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't disagree. And one of the things you and I were talking about was the role that education and learning plays in all
Hmm.
of this. And in our conversation, I was saying, we talked about, you asked me what needs to be done to create a culture, fix a culture, and communication is definitely one of those. And I would say one of the other stools is the education and the learning and the training. And I know that a lot of your leaders are, obviously, and that's my background. I have a master's in organizational development and
Hmm.
education, and every company I have built has been in the education and training space. And there is a very strong correlation and connection between the education and learning component and the culture, right? So the soft skills, as we like to call them,
Hmm.
they are they're the engine, I think, of all learning and development that is going to elevate culture. Making sure that employees are versed and trained in communication, right? In giving and receiving feedback, in team building, in conflict resolution. Um, all of these things are part of our curriculum at I5 Conscious Leadership as well. They are absolutely core elements of any type of leadership. And then uh, self-awareness, right? My partner and I, for I5 Conscious Leadership, we are both certified in the EQI, the Emotional Intelligence Assessment, which we always bring into our client organizations when we're doing conscious leadership work, because having that self-awareness around our own levels of emotional intelligence is so key. And then I bring in the Enneagram as well, which I'm certified in. So because that's another element of self-awareness. So bringing up and elevating the self-awareness component in an organization, regardless of the position that you're in, whether you are at a C level, a director level, a managerial level, if you're an individual contributor, really elevating the self-awareness component is also a way to elevate the organization and elevate the culture. And all of that is done through education.
Yeah, there's a doormat that one of my neighbors has that says check your energy, and I wish I
Yeah.
had that doormat when I was running trainings, um, because it's a good reminder not only when I'm a facilitator, but for the people who are attending the training to be mindful about their headspace and how they're approaching that event. Um, because if your energy's not aligned with what's going on, you won't engage.
Most definitely. And one of the most important catalysts for my growth and making sure that I'm bringing as much value as I can to my clients is I'm certified and very immersed in an organization called Exchange.
Hmm.
Exchange, the exchange approach. And this is a community of about 800 people worldwide. And I've been now trained and certified in their transformational facilitation models. And it is all about being conscious and intentional on every aspect of creating a learning experience for whether it's internal or external, the pre-enrollment, right? For even long before the event starts, okay? The facilitation starts. Then during the facilitation, making sure you're creating a container where people feel fully safe and heard and connected. And you do that through questioning. Our words make our worlds. And even beyond the event, the continued enrollment, making sure that you don't just disband that space that you've created during training, but that you find ways to make sure that it keeps going so that the people continue to feel supportive. So that community and that continued education and certification has completely transformed the way that I facilitate all of my educational programs and all of the containers that I create, whether it's a one-on-one conversation, like this is a container, whether it's a group training, of 5 people, whether it's, 20 people in a training, whether it is a workshop, whether it is a conference, or a speaking engagement. My focus, my thread is always making sure I'm creating that container where people feel safe to fully express and be vulnerable. Like that is what my intention is for every education and every training event that I create. And through the exchange models and the exchange community, even at this point, 35 years in my career, it has completely transformed and elevated the way that I train and educate and create those containers. And I'm about to embark on 2 other certifications there. One on conscious leadership, adding to that work, but then also
Hmm.
appreciative inquiry to get trained and certified, going deep into appreciative inquiry because our questions create all of our conditions and all of our conversations. So that's the other thing about education and how you can really elevate that. So I love doing that for my clients as well.
And you have such a different toolkit of certifications,
Hmm.
experience, and your approaches to this than the most basic level of learning and development, where the department's just order takers. They're focused on compliance.
Yeah.
Um, I call it the not fun level, because it's not only not fun for the learning and development
No.
department, it's almost torture for the employees who have to go through that process.
Yeah. We don't want that. Yeah.
Not at all. I spent a good chunk of the 90s in higher education, and back then we called online learning like computer based training. And occasionally we would get to take compliance trainings on the computer rather than have an all call and all hands and watch the PowerPoint slides fly by. is we talked about sexual harassment or discrimination or
Yeah.
company policies. Good times. I remember those times. And it and I still see organizations that basically do this with online learning. They send out the reminders and say, you must take this training.
Yeah, we do that. I mean, at different client organizations, we've done that. I mean, sexual harassment training is important, or
Mhm,
compliance training if you're in an industry that is accredited and has certain compliance requirements. Like, yeah, all of that is really important. Those are definitely, they just need to be done.
mhm. And there's even that approach to compliance if it's framed as an opportunity to learn rather than ticking the box and moving
Hmm.
on.
Yeah.
And setting up that, as you put it, the container for the
Hmm.
compliance training
Hmm.
strikes me as terrifically important.
Most definitely.
And I'm intrigued by your use of the noun container because it's come up several times. Um, what's a container mean for you?
It means an environment,
Mhm,
right? So, like, I feel you and I right now are in a container. It's just the two of us. And so when we can be very present for one another,
mhm,
right? And we're keeping out distractions, we're keeping out energy. It's possible to create containers if you have one person with you or if you have 1,000 people with you, setting
mhm,
those conditions, setting the energy, setting the rules of engagement, right? Um, I mean, even when I've been on a stage and, in front of 1,000 people, I always am intentional about that I'm in a container with these people for a finite period of time, and I wanna be as present as possible and create a positive experience for them where they feel that they can fully show up authentically.
mhm. And you're making me flip my thinking about facilitation with this idea of the container because I taught for so many years and I still teach. Um, but I have to say that I never really thought of it as a container. It was
Mhm.
um, I was aware that I was doing a performance and it had to be an authentic performance that engaged the audience so that they would learn. And come to think of it, a theater is a container too.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially when you go to a good movie and you get to the end of the movie and you realize, oh, I haven't left my seat, and
Right?
didn't go out and get my popcorn during the middle of the movie during when they had the dull scene. um it's just such a striking metaphor that I think is going to linger in my mind after our conversation today. uh,
Even a concert, right? I mean, I'm a
yeah,
huge live music fan,
yeah.
so go to a concert and, for those few hours, like, I'm just present. I am just in the moment. I am in that space, and that's it. There's nothing else coming in.
Checking the phone. I see so many people at concerts just, if they're not, pointing the phone at the stage, they're looking at their phone and engaging
Right.
on social while they're in the music.
Yeah,
And it's just my initial response is, what are you doing? You're
sure.
here in this wonderful space, just sit back and enjoy it. Dance if you need to, stand up when you need to. It's the live music piece. There's some good analogies to corporate learning too, because one of the things I like to do in a training is get people to stand up,
Yeah, sure. Get 'em
and
moving.
yeah, and clap, but it's in a genuine way, not trying to be silly or coy about it.
Yeah, I mean, you can apply the container analogy or metaphor anywhere, right? You go out
Mhm.
to dinner with friends, it's like, just be fully present, right? Like, you're in this space for a finite period of time with this person or people. I mean, that's your container.
And we've come to the point where we're such a distracted society.
Mhm, we are.
I see people who have just checked out and they could be having dinner with their family or their friends, and everybody's just constantly checking their phone instead of enjoying the space, engaging with each other, being a genuine part of the container. um
Yeah.
there have been trainings where I've said, put your phones on stun, keep them in your pocket or your purse. You'll thank me later on, trust me.
Yeah,
And
and I do a lot of work with remote cultures or
Mhm,
hybrid remote cultures, and that brings a whole nother level of challenge
mhm.
to create the container, right? Because you got people literally all over the country, in some cases, maybe even other countries. And so that's the other reason why it's so important to bring people together in so many different ways and to create opportunities for people to come together so that you're constantly refortifying the container of the organization.
And that I do a lot of remote work. I work from home.
Mhm.
And my office, I now realize I treat it as a container. When I'm not working, I close the door.
Mhm.
When I am working, yeah, the door's open, so the heat or the AC can get in, but it's still my little cocoon, my little world, where I know I've got to focus like a laser beam on what I'm doing.
Yeah,
The distractions can wait. I'm even at the point where I block in email check time on my calendar so that I'm not tempted to shift gears, look at the email or Slack, and disengage from whatever task I know I've got to complete because I blocked it in on the calendar.
right?
And there's a song that I love called "Future Me Hates Me," and it's all about the choices that we make
Yeah.
and energy. Um, I love that song because it just cuts right in to the heart of the matter for me.
Yeah, what we reap what we sow, right? So
Mhm.
our choices definitely determine our outcomes. There's no question.
Oh yeah, yeah. And with remote work, somebody could be working in a coffee shop, their kitchen table.
Mhm.
They've got the kids at home, or I'm lucky. I live alone, so my cocoon is pretty quiet.
Right.
Um, but I always have to remind myself that the experience I'm in is not the experience or container that other people are in. If it's one of my webinars or it's a Zoom call,
That is
um,
true.
yeah, I've got plenty of Zoom calls where people are calling from a common space in the office, and you can see people walking behind them. Um, they may not have been able to get into the Zoom booth in the office or the conference room, and it's not like they're checked out. It's just like um, it's almost like, I won't say it's a goldfish bowl. I'm struggling to describe how it is, but it's definitely different.
Yeah.
What are some other aspects of remote culture that um, you find are opportunities for improvement?
Well, I think, having the right technology to connect people is really important, whether you're using Slack for, like, the all day, everyday types of communication, which I find to be really important, or
Hmm.
WhatsApp, is also really good to keep groups going. Just something that makes sure that people stay connected. And then, a lot of standing meetings, right?
Hmm.
So, um, one of my most important colleagues and mentors and friends is Vern Harnish,
Hmm.
who is the founder of Entrepreneurs Organization. So I'm grateful that he is such a huge champion of my work around building advisory boards. I have the best-selling book out there on how to build advisory boards built to scale. And as people know, he is also the creator of Gazelles, Scaling Up. He has a whole community of coaches that I work with. And then he's also the author of The Rockefeller Habits. And so one of the things that he is a creator of and a proponent of are huddles, right? The stand up huddles. And
Hmm.
so this is something that we did in my previous companies, and then something that I've implemented in different organizations where, and you can do this remote, it doesn't, people don't need to be in person, but to be able to huddle on a regular basis, right? Even if it's for 7 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes in the morning with your team to know what are you working on, what are you going to accomplish today, where are your blockers, to really understand what the blockers are, to be able to move initiatives forward. And then when you have your team meeting, you can then move up the chain to like the manager meeting, and then that information flows upward, and then you can move that up to maybe even the leadership team, right? So,
Hmm.
and then you can also reverse it. I've talked to Vern about this before. With the huddle structure, you can start with the huddles at the executive team, and then they flow that down to the managerial level, and then they flow it down to the individual contributor level. So it actually can go either way with the whole huddle structure, but just having that consistency and structure is really important. When I had my direct reports of the HR team, the 7 women, um, I created I had them create a full Excel spreadsheet that was based on their level order goals. We used the model of level order planning in that organization, which then flowed up to our scorecards, and then that rolled into our performance reviews. But our level order planning had 4 level goals. It had the level 1 goal, which was like the overarching goal. It had the level 2 goal, which rolled up to the level 1, and then we had levels 3 and level 4. And our HR initiatives document that I had us create as a team, listed all of the HR, human capital, training and education, and communications initiatives. Okay. And there were a lot. There were over 50 on that sheet
Wow.
at any given time. And they were all broken into those categories underneath the level 1 goals. All right. Because we had to make sure that we were executing against those. And so that worksheet alone, like, kept us, that was our thread, right, to make sure that things were moving forward, and we marked things as green, yellow, or red. And so, everything that was in green was moving forward, no issue, right? Yellow, we there were some proceed with caution, some warning, and then red was meant that there were blocks and that my team members could not move things forward. Okay, so that was information for me, and we would meet on this tool. Like, we would go through it every single week. And that was information for me to be that advocate, to be that bridge, that catalyst, to make sure that things aren't blocked, to go to the senior leadership team and say, my team is having difficulty moving this initiative forward. This is where I need you to give feedback. This is where I need you to approve. This is where I need you to step in. Okay. Because these were
Hmm.
HR initiatives and human capital initiatives. So, performance reviews, succession planning, compensation banding, right? Approval of an educational curriculum. Um, I was on the SLT, the senior leadership team, and I was that person between my team and then the SLT. So I would come to the SLT meetings and I would say, here are all the initiatives that are going on from an HR, human capital, education, and communications perspective. Here's what's green. Here's what's yellow. Here are my blocks. Basically, I'm asking for forgiveness rather than permission, and I'm approving this, and we're moving it forward unless I hear otherwise, right? So, like, my goal and my intention as the leader, as the CHIRO, the Chief Human Resources Officer and Chief Culture Officer, my highest intention in that role was to make sure there were no blocks, and that my people felt fully supported, fully seen, fully empowered to move everything forward with momentum and velocity. And that is how I led the whole HR and culture initiative in that organization.
And that's great. The I had a picture in my mind of you trying to keep 50 flywheels going with the
Well,
help.
I had a great team.
Yeah.
I empowered, right?
Hmm.
I like the whole thing was like I had an amazing, incredibly competent, brilliant team. And my role was to be the catalyst to them moving forward. I didn't have to create all of it,
Hmm.
right? I did have to weigh in. I mean, they wanted my input on all the things that we were doing. And in some areas, I did have to, be more of a mentor, more of a leader, creating the curriculums, right? Because my instructional designers did not have 30 years experience, right? And
Hmm.
so being able to grow them and mentor them. And that was the other thing, being in the role. I mean, I just grew these people and being able to watch them and teach them how to think strategically and set them up for success, and making sure the rest of the company understood their value, right? And the other thing about being in that role was, I really stressed to the entire company the importance of taking responsibility for your own relevance, because AI is reshaping every organization. Okay. And employees may feel, and what I've exhibited in many places, is that they feel like a deer in headlights and they don't know how to keep themselves relevant. And so, how can leaders make sure that they are equipped with what they need to remain relevant and to know that they're responsible for their own relevance, but they get support as well from the leadership team? So there's a lot that is expected from the leaders, I think, in today's culture to be nurturing both the strategic element of an organization, but also the human element,
Mhm.
right? Super, super important. So
Do you have any closing thoughts for us?
uh, for for chief learning officers, for general leadership, for
Well,
who?
general leadership. Let's leave with some thoughts for the general leader.
Um, Leaders today have an incredible opportunity and responsibility to be dialed into who their employees are and what they need.
Mhm,
And if they want their companies to thrive, not just survive, they will recognize that even though AI and all this technology is coming in, their most important and valued asset is their people. Okay. We are always going to need people,
mhm.
period. And it is the humanity of an organization, it is the human element of an organization that ultimately is the most valuable. It is not the technology. And for companies that are going to end up flipping that script and prioritizing their technology over their people, they might see some short term wins, but in the long run, they're going to lose, because it is the people that nurture the relationships. It is the people that have loyalty. It is the people that grow. And it is the people who will help organizations ultimately fulfill their missions.
That's so well said. And I know that I'm going to be doing some reflection and thinking after this episode. And I'm interested in hearing what our viewers and listeners have to contribute. You can always get a hold of me on the website n3ed.com, or leave comments in YouTube if you happen to be watching the podcast. Marissa, what's a good way for people to get a hold of you?
Sure. Well, marissainternational.com is my website, and you can sign up for my newsletter there. My email is marissa@marissainternational.com. And I'm very active on LinkedIn. Marissa Levin 1 is my ID on LinkedIn, so you can find me there. I play a little around on Facebook, a little bit on Instagram, but LinkedIn is where to find me.
Yeah, LinkedIn's a great way to find me too.
Yeah.
Just look me up as Bill Sodeman, and I'm more than happy to engage and respond to inquiries. That's one of my favorite parts of the day, when people start asking me questions in posts and on the DMs. Thank you so much for being a guest with us today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And viewers and listeners, I hope you'll tune in for our next episode as we take another step on the perfect route.